I discovered the ridge on a history walk led by Dr. Baker. The histories he talked about were seemingly more mine than his. After all, I grew up here. Our house was adjacent to the ridge. And yet, Dr. Baker became my link to the time gone by.
It's just one of those stories that people tell and nobody really knows anything about it. There it is. There's that stone enclosure there, see that? A site of the graves of 4 English soldiers in 1857 whose bodies were placed on a cart by their Indian attackers and sent up the ridge on a bullock cart. And when the bodies came here, they were later buried, and this enclosure was built around those graves. The graves have been vandalized and the gravestone was removed. Either in 67 or 68, I wrote to St. Stephen's College just out of the blue. Did they have a post for me? And an answer came back straight away from the then Vice Principal, Mr. Shankland. Yes, that one of the Englishmen has just left, so if you want his post, you can come. And I arrived in college on the 19th of July, 1969. In the background you can see this circular building called Flagstaff, and it's known locally as Banta. This building has been here since 1828. This building played a very interesting role during the 1857 revolt. It was a refuge for women from the cantonment and children who were escaping from Delhi and who gathered here in May 1857.
The flagstaff elicits an empathy with events in the distant past. It seals within the suffocation of women and children who sought refuge one night, a fateful night that lent this lonely battery a distinctive life story.
Today, of course, it's used as a sports club for storing sports equipment, and I think most of the people who here, and there are people here all day, probably are unaware of its historical importance, but I think that Delhi people in general are not very interested in history. When I came in 69, it was open, and I've often climbed to the top. Yes, that's right, 84 rights we did go up there. It was just clear that Delhi was under fire, and that it was obviously, retribution for Mrs. Gandhi's death. I mean, it was a terrible thing, but this is the way that people act in India. Simply beautiful. People hesitated to walk over the ridge at night. In fact, there was an English boy teaching on the staff, Paul Smith, and we'd been either to midnight mass or Christmas carols and coming back late at night. And I told him, look, see, there's nothing, there's nobody here, perfectly safe. And then we were stopped at the top of the ridge by policemen who said, ye murder zone hai, aap log kahan ja rahe hain, kya kare hain, vagera, vagera. So apparently a body had been dumped on the ridge. And naturally, after the deed, the murderer is not going to be there. But Paul laughed afterwards and said, so much for your safe ridge, you see. But, I mean, I have walked all over the place. I remember once being on the ridge, years and years ago, and breaking off some twigs on a tree because it hadn't been pruned. And a Mali immediately jumped out of the undergrowth and, wanted to do some parishani. I was with Sagar Dwivedi, my old friend, And he said to the Mali, "Oh, wo Angrez hai, wo kuch nahi jante." Now we're just approaching the Chowburji Masjid. The building began as a tomb, but at some point this building was converted to a mosque. And when that was done, nobody knows, because the building dates from Firoz Shah's time, Firoz Shah Tughlaq, so it's well over 600 years old. You will find that other cities have not been quite so dismissive of the past as Delhi. They don't seem to be ashamed of their past. The past is part of the present. It doesn't really go away. You may rename it or try to throw it away, but it won't go away. I mean, it is there.
When flags of real and imaginary history are unfurled, monuments are easy targets. They don't retaliate, and the spectacle is for all to see. In 1947, after an attack on Chowburji, a cement effigy of Hanuman came to be set up there. It was later removed with police help. By the 90s, a Hanuman temple came up prominently at this end of the ridge, accompanied by a modern-day akhada.
Well, our students are extraordinary, what can I say? And these kind of couples that roam around the college, I mean, it seems to me socially limiting and socially inhibiting in a high degree. You know, they should be moving around with lots of people and knowing lots of people, you know. But the thought of being chained to one person for 3 years in the college and then not marrying them, I find absolutely ludicrous. You know, I mean, most of our students then seemed to have no knowledge of the ridge, no interest in the ridge, which quite amazed me, not only because of its natural beauty, but because there are 100,000, 1 lakh years of history just, you know, 2 steps away from the college. This is again a Tughlaq building. Now this is one of those buildings about which there's some kind of debate. The British thought it might be an observatory because there's a hole in the roof. Others have called it Pir Ghaib because there was some pier here who disappeared. But I'm told by people who have studied these things that there are references in Tughlaq records to this building and to the sighting of lions from this building on the ridge. So it is very definitely a hunting lodge. The building, as you can see, is of considerable height. And Timur reports having seen this building and the rest of the buildings here about 1398 from the other side of the river. And I think this Jahan Numa is a reference to the wide-ranging views that you could see from the top of the building. It's translated as world showing, and that's exactly what it is. You could see the entire world from the top of the building. There may have been a pier, and there's certainly a pier today, but that had really nothing to do with the original purpose of the building.
The Shikargah stands quiet, withholding several centuries. Did he use one of these tunnels, the Pir who vanished? Every Thursday evening, the place transforms. Several flock to the place abandoned by the Pir to seek blessings. Who's the victim, the building or history? Vanquished by popular belief.
City's changed enormously. I mean, there's almost no comparison between that slow-moving, still, you know, with some colonial hangovers of 1966, when I first saw it, in 1969. It is a different place. The people are different. Part of it, of course, has been economic reform. It's Punjabis who've made the city, and you know, they throw their weight around everywhere. And the old Urdu culture of the old city, which was already disappearing, if not already disappeared by the time I arrived, you know, has kind of fallen below the horizon. I mean, it may exist in pockets in the old city, but it no longer informs the culture of the capital. The Delhi at times seems like a city of gawaz, you know. I became a Catholic in 1990. Ever since then, that's 18 years or so, I've been coming here. Though I'd been a Catholic in heart for decades, which is quite possible in the Anglican Church because there are all kinds of different sections and beliefs. It's a very peculiar kind of organization. There was no change in my life when I became a Catholic. It's like moving from one room to another. Nothing more than that. It wasn't any sense of revenge or, feeling hardly done by at all. It was just something that I should have done years before, except that I was frightened of my father's reaction. And even then, his reaction was quite violent. And I remember that he cut me out of his will. And my sister said to me, "Why did you tell him?" And I said, "Well, there's nothing to hide. What is there to hide?" Well, it's a lovely place to be early on a Sunday morning, and there's a lovely breeze blowing. We're on the top of the ridge, and this memorial has been raised even further on a very, very high plinth. The building was erected as a kind of religious sign of a British victory over Delhi and over the capital. The names of the people who lost their lives here, and both Indian as well as British troops, are inscribed here on these plaques on the memorial. There were a number of Indians who also lost their lives fighting here, but they were fighting on the other side, and their memory is enshrined in a tablet on the front side of the building, referred to as enemy here and referred to as freedom fighters on that side. So they're both two sides of the same coin. This building was erected in 1863, and as you can see from its appearance, it has a church-like appearance, church-like style of the 19th century, and it's surmounted by a cross at the top. It was an extremely sacred site to the British. It's very difficult to think today of the emotions that 1857, the Ridge, the assault on Delhi and the fighting, what an important place this held in the lives of Britishers at the time, not of Indians, but of Britishers.
Time transformed enemies into martyrs. Some years ago, there were scribbles all over the place of Bharat Mata Ki Jai, laying claim to the final word on the past. Monuments do have destinies of their own that outlive ideas and intentions.
The kind of difficulties of a kind of transition or a transit from one place to another were helped immeasurably by those early years in college. There's no doubt about that at all. There are lots of people who are moving, either refugees or by choice. So this is nothing new. The only thing is that, I was an individual and making the trip in reverse. I was coming to India rather than running away from it. If I was running away from anything, I was probably running away from Australia. But, I think if you migrate as a family and then you are moving around with other members of your ethnic community or language community, it makes things much easier. If you are a single person, as I've thought about it later, because those early years were quite a testing time for me in a very deep kind of way. You are exchanging climates, you're exchanging food, you're exchanging dress, you're exchanging culture, language, all kinds of things are being swapped in a way. It's not that you forget one and take on another, it's not like that. So I think a lot of foreigners coming here, and I did too, fall into the habit of trying to be more Indian than the Indians. But that's only a temporary phase, Anyway, I came through whatever it was, and, then I felt as if I'd arrived in a way, and yet one can never fully arrive in a place where you've not grown up. I mean, you may not fully arrive either in the place where you have grown up. So that one can be an alien even in one's own kind of native place, so to speak. So, yeah, I can't exactly say Delhi is home, but it's certainly a place that I wouldn't want to leave. All kind of things happen to us in life, and they determine outcomes, and so it's no surprise to find me still here, though I don't know how long that would go on, but because there may come a principal who's fed up with me and doesn't want me around, so I have to take note of that, I don't have anything more to say to that.